Commander Hal stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominion's Claw, and watched the blue planet grow larger on the viewing screen. He had conquered 47 worlds across 3 galaxies. He had brought entire civilizations to their knees with nothing more than the sight of his fleet. This small planet called Earth would be no different. "Sub-Commander," he said without turning around, "status report." Stepped forward nervously. He was a thin creature with pale gray skin and large dark eyes that always seemed worried about something. "Sir, we have 200 vessels in formation. All weapons are ready. Ground forces are prepared for deployment." "Excellent." Hal allowed himself a small smile. "And what do we know about the natives?" "They call themselves humans, sir. They have no unified planetary government. Their technology is primitive. They have not achieved faster-than-light travel. They spend most of their time fighting among themselves over resources and imaginary lines they draw on maps." Hal laughed. "Pathetic. This will be our easiest conquest yet." "Sir, I must note that our intelligence reports are incomplete. We have limited data on their military capabilities and almost nothing on their history or psychology." "Why would I need to know their history? They will have no future after today." Hal waved his hand dismissively. "Begin the operation. Send a scout drone to assess their defenses. Pick a random settlement and observe." Wanted to argue, but he knew better. He had served under Hal for 15 cycles and had learned that the commander did not appreciate caution. He gave the order and watched a small drone detach from the fleet and descend toward the planet's surface. The drone's destination was a rural area in a region the humans called Montana. It was chosen because it appeared peaceful and isolated, the perfect place to observe primitive beings going about their simple lives. At that same moment, roughly 300 miles below, Danny Cole was sitting on his porch and drinking his evening coffee. He was 54 years old, retired from the Marines after 25 years of service, and he now spent his days running a small farm. He liked the quiet life. He liked watching the sunset over the mountains. He liked being left alone. His dog, a large German shepherd named Duke, suddenly lifted his head and growled at the sky. "What is it, boy?" Danny set down his coffee and looked up. There were lights in the sky, strange lights that moved in ways that airplanes and helicopters could not. Danny had seen plenty of aircraft during his military career. These were not aircraft, at least not any aircraft built by humans. He went inside and grabbed his rifle, not because he planned to start a fight, but because Danny Cole never went anywhere without a way to defend himself. Old habits from old wars. A few miles away, Lewis was setting up her telescope in her backyard. She was a high school science teacher with a passion for astronomy. She had been tracking satellites and space stations for years. Tonight, she saw something that made her heart stop. Hundreds of objects were entering Earth's orbit. They were too large to be satellites, too numerous to be anything natural, and they were slowing down, which meant they were controlled. She grabbed her phone and called Sheriff Ben Harper. "Ben, you need to look at the sky right now." Ben was in his patrol car, finishing paperwork from a quiet day of speeding tickets and lost dogs. "I don't have time for another UFO theory." "This is not a theory, look up." Ben stepped out of his car and looked up. His coffee cup fell from his hand and shattered on the ground. "What in the name of—" "Yeah," said, "that's what I thought too." Back on Danny's farm, the scout drone descended through the clouds and hovered above his property. It was about the size of a basketball, silver and smooth, with glowing blue lights around its edges. It made a soft humming sound as it scanned the area. Danny watched it for about 30 seconds. Then he raised his rifle, aimed carefully, and fired once. The drone exploded in a shower of sparks and metal fragments. It crashed into his cornfield and lay there smoking. Duke barked at it twice, then looked at Danny as if asking what to do next. "Good question," Danny muttered. He walked over to the wreckage and poked it with his boot. The technology was unlike anything he had ever seen. Smooth metal that seemed to have no seams. Lights that still flickered even though the thing was clearly destroyed. He pulled out his phone and called Amy Porter, his neighbor. Amy was a former Army medic who now worked as a veterinarian. She was practical, calm, and owned more guns than Danny did. "Amy, I need you to come over here. Bring your kit, and maybe a rifle." "What happened? Did you shoot someone?" "I shot something, not sure what it is, but it came from the sky and there's a whole lot more up there." Amy arrived 10 minutes later, her medical bag in one hand and a shotgun in the other. She looked at the wreckage, then looked at Danny, then looked at the sky where the strange lights still moved in formation. "Well," she said calmly, "this is new." Aboard the Dominion's Claw, Commander Hal stared at his screen in disbelief. The drone's final transmission showed a single human destroying advanced reconnaissance technology with what appeared to be a primitive projectile weapon. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "That drone had defensive shields." "Apparently not strong enough, sir," said quietly. Hal's eyes narrowed. "One lucky shot means nothing. Proceed with the invasion." In the corner of the bridge, a small female named sat at her research station. She was the fleet's historian and cultural analyst, responsible for understanding conquered species. She had just begun downloading Earth's information networks, and what she found made her blood run cold. She opened a file about something called World War II. Then she opened another file about nuclear weapons, then another about something called the Vietnam War, then the Korean War, the Gulf Wars, countless conflicts that spanned the entire planet. Her hands began to shake. "Commander," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I think we may have made a serious mistake." But Hal was not listening. He was already giving orders to deploy ground forces. 3 landing parties would touch down at dawn: Montana, Chicago, and Arizona. 3 locations to establish dominance and accept the humans' surrender. He had no idea what was waiting for him. Down on Earth, Danny and Amy stood in the cornfield, looking at the wreckage of technology from another world. Sheriff Ben Harper's patrol car was racing up the dirt road toward them, lights flashing. Lewis was already posting pictures to the internet, and somewhere in the distance, the first calls were going out to military command. The invasion had begun, but it was not going to go the way they expected. Not even close. The landing craft touched down in Danny Cole's north pasture at exactly 6 in the morning. The ship was large and shaped like a curved blade, black metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. A ramp extended from its belly, and 20 soldiers marched out in perfect formation. Their commander was a young officer named. He was eager to prove himself. He had trained his entire life for moments like this. He would accept the surrender of these primitive beings and report his success to Commander Hal. He did not expect to find 4 humans waiting for him, with weapons pointed at his face. Danny stood in the center, his rifle raised. Amy was on his left with her shotgun. Sheriff Ben Harper was on his right with his service pistol drawn, and standing slightly behind them was Lewis, holding her phone and the entire encounter to the internet. "Morning," Danny said calmly. "You folks got a permit for landing on private property." Blinked his large black eyes. This was not in his training. Conquered species were supposed to fall to their knees in terror. They were supposed to beg for mercy. They were not supposed to ask about permits. "I am commander of the Dominion," he announced in what he believed was a commanding voice. "Your planet is now under our control. Lay down your weapons and surrender, and you will be treated fairly." Danny looked at Amy. Amy looked at Ben. Ben looked back at Danny. "Did he just say surrender?" Amy asked. "I believe he did," Ben replied. "Huh?" Danny scratched his chin with his free hand, keeping his rifle steady with the other. "Son, I don't think you understand where you are. This is Montana. We don't surrender to anything, not even the weather." felt the first small tremor of doubt. You do not understand. We have 200 warships in orbit above your planet. We have weapons that can destroy your cities in seconds. Resistance is pointless. Amy yawned. That's nice. Hey, you know my cousin works at a missile silo about 2 counties over. Nuclear missiles, you know what those are. Did not know what those were, but he did not like the casual way this human mentioned them. Your primitive weapons are no match for technology, he said, but his voice was slightly less confident now. Uh-huh. Danny glanced at the sky where the distant shapes of alien vessels could still be seen. Tell you what, why don't you get back in your fancy ship and go talk to your boss? Tell him that if he wants this planet, he's going to have to work for it. Before could respond, the sound of engines filled the air. A military convoy was approaching from the east, Humvees and trucks carrying National Guard troops. Sergeant Sam jumped out of the lead vehicle and walked over to join the group. Sheriff Harper, Sam said with a nod. Mr. Cole, ma'am. He looked at the soldiers with mild interest. These the aliens everyone's talking about. That's them, Ben confirmed. Sam studied them for a moment. They don't look so tough. Aboard the Dominion's Claw, things were not going well. Commander Hal had expected reports of successful surrenders by now. Instead, he was receiving confused messages from all 3 landing parties. The Montana team reported that the humans were asking strange questions and pointing weapons at them. The Chicago team had landed in what they thought was an open area, but turned out to be a parking lot. They were now surrounded by angry humans in metal vehicles who kept making loud honking sounds and shouting about something called traffic. And the Arizona team had landed near a place called Phoenix, where a group of humans immediately approached them with big smiles and asked if they were filming a movie. What is a movie? Hal demanded. I am researching that now, sir, Historian said from her station. Her voice sounded strange, shaky. It appears to be a form of entertainment where humans pretend to fight imaginary enemies, including aliens, for fun. They have entertainment about fighting aliens. Yes, sir, thousands of them. They seem to enjoy the concept greatly. Hal felt a headache forming behind his eyes. What about their military response? Surely they are mobilizing their forces. They are, sir, pulled up a display. We are detecting significant activity at numerous military installations across the planet. Aircraft are launching. Naval vessels are changing course. Ground forces are mobilizing. How many? His face went pale. All of them, sir. It appears they are all mobilizing. Every nation on the planet is responding simultaneously. This was unexpected. On other conquered worlds, it took days for planetary governments to organize any kind of response. They would establish control long before any resistance could form. But Earth's military was moving within hours, within minutes even. How is that possible? Hal asked. They have no unified government. They are constantly fighting each other. It appears they have stopped fighting each other, sir, said quietly. They seem to have found a common enemy. Back in Montana was growing increasingly uncomfortable. More humans kept arriving. Some were in military uniforms. Others were just regular civilians who had heard about the aliens and wanted to see for themselves. Several brought food. One old woman offered the soldiers cookies. Why are you giving us food? Asked, utterly confused. Because you look hungry, dear, the old woman said. Also, those guns look heavy. Would you like to sit down? Did not know how to respond to kindness from a species he was supposed to be conquering. Danny approached him with a cup of coffee. Here, you look like you could use this. What is it? Coffee, it'll wake you up. Took the cup cautiously and sniffed it. The smell was strange but not unpleasant. He took a small sip. 3 seconds later, he collapsed to the ground, shaking and gasping. His soldiers rushed to help him as his heart raced out of control. What did you give him? One soldier shouted. Just coffee, Danny said, genuinely concerned. It's caffeine, everyone drinks it. Caffeine is a deadly toxin. Amy knelt beside the fallen and checked his pulse. Huh, interesting. I guess your species can't handle stimulants. Don't worry, he'll be fine, probably. She pulled out her medical kit and began treating him, completely ignoring the weapons that the other soldiers pointed at her. After a few minutes, his breathing stabilized. You saved him, a soldier said in disbelief. Why would you save an enemy? Amy shrugged. I'm a doctor, it's what I do. Besides, you haven't actually done anything to hurt us yet. You just landed in a field and made some threats. That's not really a crime worth dying over. The soldiers exchanged confused looks. Their training had not prepared them for any of this. They were supposed to be the conquerors. They were supposed to be feared. Instead, they were being offered cookies and medical treatment. On the Dominion's claw, Historian had made a discovery that changed everything. Commander, she said, her voice trembling, I need to show you something about human history, something important. What is it? She pulled up her research on the main screen. They created nuclear weapons approximately 80 years ago, weapons capable of destroying entire cities in a single explosion. That is concerning but not unprecedented. No, sir. What is unprecedented is what they did next. His hands shook as she continued. They used these weapons on themselves, on their own cities. They killed hundreds of thousands of their own people, and then they built more. They currently have enough nuclear weapons to destroy their entire planet multiple times over. The bridge fell silent. Why, Hal asked. Why would any species do that? Looked at him with fear in her eyes. I do not know, sir, but I am beginning to think we should not be here. Historian stood before the command staff of the fleet, her presentation displayed on the main screen. She had spent the last several hours downloading and analyzing every piece of information she could find about humanity. What she discovered had kept her awake with terror. I will begin with basic biology, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Humans are what they call apex predators. They evolved on a world filled with dangerous creatures and they killed or dominated all of them. They are omnivores, meaning they eat everything. Plants, animals, and in some cases, things that are actively poisonous to other species. Commander Hal leaned back in his chair, impressive but hardly threatening. There is more, sir, much more, changed the display. Humans have a unique hunting strategy. They do not chase prey at high speed. Instead, they follow it, for hours, sometimes for days. They walk slowly and steadily while their prey runs, rests, and runs again. Eventually, the prey dies of exhaustion and the humans eat it. Several officers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This is called persistence hunting, continued. No other species in our records does this. Humans do not give up. They do not stop. They simply keep coming until their target is too tired to fight. Surely this is an outdated practice, said hopefully. They still do it for entertainment, sir. They call it marathon running. They run 42 kilometers without stopping, for fun. Hal felt something he had not felt in a very long time, doubt. What else? He asked quietly. Took a deep breath. Wolves. Wolves were one of the most dangerous predators on their planet. Humans found them, tamed them, and turned them into loyal companions. They live with wolves in their homes now. They call them dogs. They domesticated apex predators. Yes, sir, and horses which they ride into battle, and elephants which are the largest land animals on their planet, and cats, though the cats may have domesticated them instead. The records are unclear on that point. She changed the display again. Now their history. Humans have been at war with each other almost continuously since they developed civilization. They have fought over land, resources, religion, and ideology. Sometimes they fight for no clear reason at all. Their major conflicts have killed millions of their own kind. And yet they continue to exist, observed. They thrive, sir. Every war makes them stronger. They develop new weapons, new strategies, new technologies. Their deadliest inventions almost always come from wartime research. Flight, nuclear power, computers, even the network I am using to research them now. All products of war. Commander Hal stood up slowly. You mentioned nuclear weapons earlier. Explain them fully. Displayed images that made several officers gasp. Mushroom clouds rising over flattened cities. Devastation on a scale that they had never achieved with their own weapons. These are nuclear weapons. They harness the power of atomic reactions to create explosions of unimaginable force. A single weapon can destroy an entire city. The radiation left behind kills for years afterward, and humans have thousands of these weapons aimed at each other at all times. At each other? Yes, sir. They call it mutually assured destruction. If one nation attacks another with nuclear weapons, the other will launch their own in response. Everyone dies. No one wins. That is insane, an officer said. I agree, sir, but it has kept them from using these weapons on each other for 80 years. They live in constant fear of extinction, and they consider this peace. The bridge was silent for a long moment. There is one more thing, said. Perhaps the most concerning of all. Humans engage in something called extreme sports. They jump from cliffs wearing fabric wings. They climb frozen mountains where the air itself can kill them. They dive into the deepest parts of their oceans. They do these things voluntarily, knowing they might die because they find it exciting. She looked directly at Commander Hal. Sir, these beings are not afraid of death. They court it. They challenge it, and when it takes one of them, the others line up to try again. On the ground in Montana, the situation had grown increasingly strange. Danny Cole had organized what he called a neighborhood watch. Local hunters were tracking the patrol units through the forest, staying just out of sight but always present. The aliens knew they were being watched. They could hear footsteps in the woods, see shadows between the trees, but whenever they turned to look, no one was there. They're playing with us, a soldier reported to, like we are prey. Had recovered from his caffeine poisoning, though he still felt shaky. Amy Porter had saved his life, and he did not know how to process that. Enemies were not supposed to save each other. Sheriff Ben Harper had set up a command post at Danny's farm. National Guard Sergeant Sam was coordinating with military command, and the news was not good for the fighter jets are in the air, Sam reported. Navy ships are moving into position. The president is about to address the nation. The whole world knows you're here and nobody's happy about it. Tried to maintain his composure. We have 200 warships in orbit. Your primitive aircraft are no threat to us. Sam smiled. It was not a friendly smile. Maybe, but we've got submarines with nuclear missiles pointed at your fleet right now, and missile silos all over the country ready to launch. You might destroy some of our cities, but we'll take your whole fleet with us. Is that a trade you want to make? It was not a trade wanted to make. In the farmhouse, Lois was still. Her feed had gone viral. Millions of people around the world were watching this small group of humans face down an alien invasion force. Can you believe this? She said into her phone. They came here expecting us to just give up. They didn't do any research. They don't know anything about us. Amy brought more coffee, carefully keeping it away from the soldiers this time. That's pretty typical, actually. Every empire in history thought they were invincible until they weren't. Danny nodded in agreement. Napoleon thought he could take Russia. The British thought they could hold America. The Romans thought they'd last forever. Arrogance always loses in the end. A young soldier approached them hesitantly. "Excuse me," he said. "What is that sound?" Everyone stopped to listen. In the distance, a rhythmic thumping was growing louder. The ground itself seemed to vibrate. Sam grinned. That would be the helicopters. Helicopters? Apache attack helicopters, specifically. You're about to meet some of our more persuasive negotiators. They looked up as dark shapes appeared over the tree line. The helicopters were bristling with weapons, their rotors beating the air like war drums. They hovered in formation, pointed directly at the alien landing craft. On the Dominion's claw, Commander Hal watched through orbital cameras as his ground forces were systematically surrounded by human military units. Aircraft filled the skies. Armored vehicles blocked every escape route. And humans, ordinary civilians, stood watching from a safe distance as if this were some kind of entertainment. "Sir," said quietly, "I have reviewed their historical records more thoroughly. I need to tell you something." "What is it?" Swallowed hard. "The humans call the current period peacetime. They have not had a major global war in 80 years. Their militaries are at what they consider reduced readiness. What we are seeing is not their full capability. It is not even close." Hal stared at him. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that if we actually provoke them into a real war, they will build more weapons, faster ships, deadlier technology. They did it before and they will do it again. We are not facing the humans at war, sir. We are facing them at rest, and they are still overwhelming us." The commander sat down slowly, feeling the weight of his decision pressing down on him. "What do you recommend?" he asked. Straightened his uniform. "I recommend we leave, sir, immediately, before they decide to follow us." Ground forces in Montana had a problem. They were surrounded but not by military units. Instead, curious civilians kept approaching them, asking questions and offering food. A teenager wanted to take a picture with them. An elderly man asked if their ship ran on gasoline. A woman tried to sell them homemade jam. Commander had never been so confused in his entire life. "Stay back," he ordered, though his voice lacked conviction. "We are an invasion force." "Sure you are, honey," the woman with the jam said. "But you still look hungry. This is strawberry, made it myself." Danny Cole stood nearby, watching the scene with amusement. The aliens had come expecting a war and found a community picnic instead. Their training had clearly not prepared them for aggressive hospitality. Amy Porter was examining one of the soldiers who had developed a rash after touching some local plants. "Hold still," she said, applying ointment to his arm. "You're having an allergic reaction. Don't scratch it." "Why are you helping me?" the soldier asked. "Because you're hurt and I'm a doctor. It's not complicated." Amy finished her work and patted him on the shoulder. "There, you'll be fine in a few hours." Sheriff Ben Harper received a call on his radio and stepped aside to answer it. When he returned, his expression was serious. "Military command says the president just gave the order. Full defensive mobilization. Every branch, every base, every asset we have. And the same thing is happening in Russia, China, Europe, everywhere. The whole world is pointing guns at those ships up there." Sam checked his own communications device. "My commanding officer says nuclear submarines have surfaced and are ready to launch. Missile silos are active. They're giving your fleet exactly 1 hour to leave Earth's orbit before things get serious." Felt his stomach turn to ice. "You would destroy your own planet to stop us." "We'd destroy anything to stop you," Danny said simply. "That's kind of our thing." Aboard the Dominion's claw, Commander Hal was receiving reports from all 3 landing parties, and none of them were good. The Chicago team was trapped in what the humans called rush hour traffic. Their landing craft was surrounded by thousands of metal vehicles, and the humans inside those vehicles seemed more angry about being late to work than afraid of alien invaders. One human had gotten out of his car and was shouting at the soldiers about blocking the intersection. "He is threatening us, sir," the team leader reported. "He says he will report us to something called the City Council if we do not move our ship." "Ignore him and proceed with the mission," Hal ordered. "We cannot proceed, sir. The vehicles are blocking all routes, and more humans keep arriving. They are taking pictures of us and making strange gestures with their middle fingers." The Arizona team had an even stranger problem. A large group of humans had gathered around their landing site, but instead of running away, they were applauding. "They think we are part of an entertainment production, sir," the team leader explained. "They keep asking when the cameras will start filming. Several have asked for something called autographs. One human is trying to sell us bottles of water for $5 each." $5? What is a dollar? "I believe it is their currency, sir." He seems very insistent. Historian was still at her research station, digging deeper into human culture. What she found made her increasingly certain that this invasion was the worst decision in history. "Commander," she said, "I have discovered something important. The humans have already planned for this scenario." "What do you mean?" "Alien invasions. They have created thousands of stories about beings from other worlds coming to conquer them. Books, movies, games, military training exercises. They have been preparing for us, in theory, for over 100 years. Hal stared at her. "They expected us to come." "They hoped for it, sir. They seem excited by the concept. Their entertainment often depicts humans defeating vastly superior alien forces through determination, cleverness, and sheer refusal to give up." She paused. "In most of their stories, the aliens lose badly." Back in Montana, Danny had invited to sit on his porch. The alien commander was too exhausted and confused to refuse. He sat on the wooden steps, surrounded by humans who should have been his prisoners, but instead seemed to view him as an unexpected guest. "I do not understand your species," admitted. "We came to conquer you. You should hate us." Danny shrugged. "You haven't actually done anything yet. You landed in my field, made some threats, and drank some coffee that nearly killed you. That's not really worth hatting someone over. But we intended to enslave your entire planet." "Intent isn't action. You intended to do a lot of things. What you actually did was put on a show for the neighbors." Danny gestured at the crowd of civilians, many of whom were now having lunch and chatting with off-duty soldiers. "Looks like first contact to me. Weird first contact, but first contact." Amy sat down next to them, having finished treating various minor ailments among both humans and, "Your species has some interesting biology. No caffeine tolerance, obviously, but your immune system is fascinating. Mind if I publish a paper about this someday?" Did not know what to say. These humans were treating an invasion like a research opportunity. Sam approached with a tablet showing satellite imagery. "You might want to see this," he said too. "This is what's pointing at your fleet right now." The screen showed naval vessels from a dozen different nations, all converging on positions around the globe. Fighter jets filled the skies over every continent. Missile batteries were active on every landmass. And underneath the oceans, nuclear submarines waited for orders. "This is just the first response," Sam explained. "If your fleet attacks, we activate everything else: reserves, civilian militias, emergency production. Within a month, we'd have twice as many weapons as we do now. Within a year, we'd be building ships to chase you." Looked at the images in horror. "Why do you have so many weapons?" "Mostly for each other," Sam admitted. "We've been fighting ourselves for thousands of years. Aliens showing up is just a change of target." On the Dominion's claw, Commander Hal faced the terrible truth that Sub-Commander had been trying to tell him all along. The fleet's sensors showed Earth's military response in real time. Aircraft carriers were launching fighters at an incredible rate. Ground-based missiles were tracking vessels. Satellites were redirecting to observe the fleet. And underneath it all, the nuclear weapons waited, enough to turn the entire fleet into radioactive debris. "Sir," said quietly, "I must formally request that we abort this mission." "I am considering it." "Consider faster, sir. Their submarines are moving into firing positions. Once they launch, we cannot outrun their missiles." Historian added her own findings. "Sir, I have discovered something else. Humans have a phrase, mutually assured destruction. They have lived with the knowledge that they could end their own species for 80 years. The concept does not frighten them anymore. They have accepted it, embraced it even. If we force them to choose between surrender and extinction, they will choose extinction. Hal closed his eyes. What kind of species chooses death over defeat? Humans, sir, answered. Apparently humans. The countdown had begun. Somewhere in the depths of the Pacific Ocean, nuclear submarines waited for the order to launch. Somewhere in the heartland of America, missile silo crews sat at their controls, ready to turn keys. And somewhere in Montana, a retired Marine, a veterinarian, a sheriff, a teacher, and a National Guard sergeant sat on a porch, drinking coffee and watching aliens come to terms with the worst mistake of their lives. The hour was almost up. Commander Hal stood on the bridge of the Dominion's claw, watching the tactical display with growing horror. Earth's military forces were now fully mobilized. Every ocean was filled with warships. Every sky was crowded with aircraft. And those nuclear weapons, those terrible weapons that could burn entire cities to ash, were all pointed at his fleet. He had conquered 47 planets. He had never felt fear like this. "How much time do we have?" he asked. 12 minutes, sir," replied. "Their ultimatum expires in 12 minutes. Historian had one final piece of information to share. She had saved it for this moment because she knew it would be the killing blow. "Commander, I need to tell you something about human space programs. They barely have space programs. They cannot travel faster than light." "That is true, sir, but I found something in their history that I think you should hear," pulled up her research. 60 years ago, the humans sent members of their species to their moon, a journey of nearly 400,000 kilometers through the void of space. Impressive for primitives, but hardly relevant. I am not finished, sir. When asked why they did this, why they risked their lives to visit a dead rock with no resources, one of their leaders gave an answer that has been recorded in their history. She paused. He said they did it not because it was easy, but because it was hard. The bridge fell silent. "They went to space not for profit or power or survival," continued. "They went because the challenge existed and they could not resist trying to overcome it. This is the core of human nature. They do not ask if something is possible. They ask if it is difficult enough to be interesting." Hal understood now. He understood everything. These beings were not like the other species he had conquered. They did not build weapons because they were afraid. They built weapons because they enjoyed the challenge. They did not resist invaders because they thought they could win. They resisted because resistance itself was the point. Victory was just a bonus. "All ships," he said, his voice steady despite the fear in his hearts. "Prepare for immediate withdrawal, full retreat, now." The order spread through the fleet in seconds. 200 vessels began powering up their hyperspace drives. The Dominion's claw turned away from Earth, and for the first time in its long career of conquest, it ran. On the ground in Montana, Commander received the message from orbit. The invasion was over. All ground forces were to return to their ships immediately. He stood up from Danny Cole's porch, not quite sure what to say. They had come as conquerors. They were leaving as what? Not friends exactly, but not enemies either. Something strange and new that had no word in his language. "I suppose this is goodbye," he said. Danny extended his hand. "Take care of yourself, Commander, and maybe do some research next time before you pick a fight." Looked at the hand, uncertain. Amy showed him how to shake it. "It is a greeting," she explained. "Also a farewell, and sometimes a sign of respect between former opponents." Shook Danny's hand carefully, then Amy's, then Ben's, then Sam's. He shook hands with the soldiers and the civilians and even the old woman who had offered him jam. "I do not understand your species," he admitted one last time, "but I think I will remember you." "Likewise," Danny said. "Don't take this the wrong way, but I hope we never see you again." "I hope the same, human. I truly do." The soldiers boarded their landing craft and lifted off. The crowd watched them go, waving and taking pictures. Lewis continued her, narrating the retreat for the millions of viewers who had followed the entire invasion. And there they go, folks. The Great Dominion, conquerors of 47 planets, running away from a bunch of farmers, a teacher, and a county sheriff. I think we can call this one a win. In orbit, the fleet gathered for the jump to hyperspace. Commander Hal stood at his command post, watching Earth shrink on such a small planet, such an unassuming place, and yet it had humiliated him in ways that no enemy ever had. Log this system as restricted, he ordered. Class Omega, the highest danger level. What should I write in the official record, sir? Asked. Hal thought for a long moment. Write this: Planet Earth. Dominant species, humans. Classification, extremely hostile. Do not invade, do not contact, do not even acknowledge. These beings are not sane by any known standard. They build weapons that can destroy themselves. They fight wars for abstract concepts. They pursue challenges for their own sake. They are chaos given physical form, and they must be avoided at all costs. Historian added her own note to the record. Humans invented nuclear weapons before they invented a unified government. They went to their moon not for resources, but because it was there. They domesticated wolves. They drink poison for pleasure. They are afraid of nothing, including their own extinction. I recommend that no vessel approach this system for at least 10,000 years. The fleet jumped to hyperspace and vanished from Earth's solar system. Within minutes, the skies were clear again. Down on Danny's farm, the celebration had begun. Neighbors brought more food. Someone found a guitar and started playing. The National Guard troops relaxed their positions and joined the party. Even the Apache helicopters had landed, their pilots eager to hear the full story. Danny sat on his porch with Amy, Ben, and Sam, watching the stars come out. The same stars that, just hours ago, had been filled with alien warships. Well, Danny said, sipping his coffee, that was something. Amy laughed. Something. That's one way to put it. I almost wish they'd stayed longer. I had so many questions about their biology. Ben shook his head. I'm going to be doing paperwork for months. Alien invasion reports, witness statements, property damage assessments. Danny, I'm blaming you for shooting down that drone. It was on my property, Danny said with a shrug. I had every right. Checked her phone and let out a low whistle. My hit 50 million views. 50 million. I'm going to be famous. Sam just laughed. I joined the National Guard for college money. Nobody told me I'd be negotiating with aliens before I turned 30. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, 200 ships were racing away from Earth as fast as their engines could carry them. Somewhere out there, a vast empire was updating its records to mark one small blue planet as the most dangerous place in the known universe. And here, on a farm in Montana, a group of humans drank coffee and enjoyed the evening, completely unaware that they had just become legends. The next morning, the world woke up to a new reality. Humanity was not alone in the universe, but more importantly, humanity had proven something that the aliens had never expected. They could not be conquered. They would not surrender, and if anyone came looking for a fight, they would find one. Danny Cole went back to tending his farm. Amy Porter returned to her veterinary practice. Ben Harper filed his reports. Lewis became an internet celebrity, and Sam was promoted to lieutenant, though he insisted the real heroes were the civilians who treated an invasion like a neighborhood event. Life went on, as it always did. But somewhere in deep space, the Dominion spread a warning to every spacefaring civilization they knew. Avoid the third planet from the star called Sol. The creatures there are not afraid of anything, not death, not destruction, not even themselves. They call themselves humans. And they are absolutely insane.